Okay, so what we're looking at here is the Federal Circuit map, and there are 13 circuits in the federal court system. All right. Of those, 11 are geographic circuits, and then there are 2 which I'll explain. But looking at this map, um, the white lines, or I should say the dotted black lines, are federal districts. All right. So if we're looking at the 6th Federal Circuit, you can see that there's an S indicating that we are currently in the Southern District of Ohio in the 6th Federal Circuit. All right. And we also see a star where Cincinnati is. And that star tells us there's a U.S. Court of Appeals, which is the intermediate appellate court in the federal system. So in other words, and we'll actually talk through this. Well, by the time you run this back, we would have already done so with Kipps versus Collier. But there's a trial court, a district court for the Southern District of Ohio. That's in Cincinnati. And if I sue in that court and I disagree with the decision, I can appeal, right? And that would go for Southern District of Ohio, but also Western District of Michigan or Middle District of Tennessee. If I get a decision that I don't like in any of those jurisdictions, I can appeal to the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the intermediate appellate circuit. And if I lose there and I'm still not happy or I don't think the court has properly applied the law, my next level appeal is to the United States Supreme Court. All right. So districts 1 through 11 are your geographic districts, and they're based on legal issues that happen in their respective geographic areas. The 12th is also a geographic area as well, but it really only relates to Washington, D.C. All right. The 13th, which I believe is in the same building as the 12th, but a different federal circuit, a different circuit, is called the Federal Circuit. All right. So the Federal Circuit exists to sue the federal government, and that's why it exists. So if I believe that I have been deprived of a right by the federal government and I want to sue the federal government, doesn't matter where I live, that case has to be filed in the 13th Federal District, the Federal Circuit. Okay. All right, so here's just another visual of the overlap between federal and state courts. This is not to scale because if it were, the yellow would be almost the entirety of the slide. Over 90% of all cases go through state court systems, and obviously there's each state has their own court. And Puerto Rico and DC and Guam and the American territories all have their own courts. All right, so the vast majority of cases are questions of state law. Property, excluding bankruptcy, all go through state law. Exclusive federal district. And so the exclusive means that there's no way to hear a matter involving property or adoption or divorce in federal court. Those are always state issues. Exclusive federal jurisdiction, these are cases that can only be heard in federal court. All right, and we have a list here. I'll just hit the hot points. Patents, copyrights, so intellectual property is a federal course. There's admiralty. You've probably heard me use that word a few times, which relates to the American Patrol Waterways. Bankruptcy is federal, even though it sounds like it would be state. Bankruptcy is federal because it's in the Constitution as federal. All right. All of these are exclusively federal, which means you cannot hear these cases in state court. All right. So the green is the overlap, concurrent jurisdiction. So this might be something that is otherwise exclusively state, but it has a question of a constitutional question added to it. Well, a single federal question makes that a case for concurrent jurisdiction. And then your diversity of citizenship states, where plaintiff is resident of one state, defendant is resident of another, and it technically could even be, in most cases will be, a state law claim, but one of the parties is a resident of a different state and the amount in controversy exceeds $75,000. So if this were to scale, this would be huge. Exclusive state jurisdiction would be huge. Exclusive federal jurisdiction would be much smaller, and concurrent jurisdiction would be the smallest of the bunch. All right, so let's talk about jurisdiction. It says in cyberspace, but we're really talking about jurisdiction from the internet, or transactions that are done online. All right. Well, where is jurisdiction proper when you have an online transaction? And the answer is, well, there's a sliding scale. And really we're talking about business conduct. And the reality is, if the defendant, and really when we're talking about jurisdiction, you're always really talking about the defendant, because the plaintiff has to agree to jurisdiction when they file the case. All right? So when the defendant conducts substantial business over the internet, right, jurisdiction is proper, which really tells us that, for instance, Amazon could be sued in any state because they're going to do substantial business with any state. That's at one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum, you know, maybe just a banner advertisement that you see on the website. Well, that's not enough to hold jurisdiction for the area in which that banner ad appeared, the geographic area. So if I'm in California and I see a banner and I click through and then later have litigation, that's probably not going to be enough to give basis, that's not going to be a sufficient basis for jurisdiction. And then the action is really in the middle. So substantial business to jurisdiction is proper. Passive advertising jurisdiction is improper. Right? In that case, that doesn't mean you can't sue. It just means you'd have to find that company where they could be held to have jurisdiction. But in the middle, it's a big, it depends. All right? So this is a very technical chapter. We'll talk about venue. Um, Venue is where the trial should be held. In the vast majority of cases, venue and jurisdiction are the same. The only time when we'll deviate from that is when it would not be possible to have a fair trial in the same area where the incident occurred. The example would be it's rare for courts to agree to change venue anymore, but one recent example where that happened was the hot car case in Atlanta, Georgia, where a guy took his car to work with his child in the back seat, parked it, and in the hot Georgia summer, the child overheated and did die. And at first it was investigated as an accident, but the more police started to ask questions, they realized that he actually was motivated to kill his son so that he could make a clean break from his wife, so that he could take up residence and live with his girlfriend. Well, when the court went to select jurors, everybody was familiar with the trial and already had formed an opinion of it. So the venue was changed to South Georgia, where they had less media coverage of this incident, and they felt that an impartial jury could be found in South Georgia. So that's how venue works. For vast majority of cases, it's not a major question, but it only becomes an issue when it would not be possible to have a fair trial due to media coverage in a particular geographic area. All right. Let's talk about standing. Standing to sue is the party's right to bring a lawsuit. All right. So if I was harmed, or if I'm a parent and my child was harmed, or if I'm married and my spouse was harmed, then I have standing to sue. Really, it means that I must have had a loss or an injury. I must claim to have had a financial loss or some sort of legal injury. All right. There must be a justifiable controversy, not something that might hypothetically happen in the future. In other words, this is much easier illustrated with examples, which we'll do in class. But if I have a question or I'm concerned about the actions of a party, but there hasn't been any legal detriment, legal injury yet, then I don't have standing to sue. State court systems will mirror the structure of federal court systems generally. Sometimes the names are different, but in Ohio is divided into districts. I think there are 12. And each district has an appellate court, and then there's an Ohio Supreme Court. So each county has its own court system. Their district court of appeals, which you can appeal from the county system too. And if you still don't believe that the appellate court got it right at that level, you can appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court. And we'll walk through this in class.